Most preppers will die with full pantries. Not from starvation, not from dehydration, not from any of the 100 threats their gear was designed to counter. They'll die because the moment the world stopped making sense, something inside them stopped working, and no freeze-dried meal or laminated emergency contact list was ever going to fix that. If that sentence bothers you, good. Sit with it, because what I'm about to cover is going to be more useful than anything you've spent money on in the last year of prepping. Special Forces selection programs around the world share a design philosophy that almost nobody in the prepper community talks about, because it doesn't photograph well, and you can't buy it on Amazon. The physical brutality, the cold water immersion, the sleep deprivation, the rucksack marches through darkness isn't the point. It never was. That suffering is a delivery mechanism. It creates conditions under which specific cognitive and perceptual skills either emerge or don't. The operators who make it through aren't just harder, they think differently, they see differently. They survive things that kill other people not because they have better gear, but because they have better mental infrastructure. There are 3 specific skills that infrastructure is built on, 3 capabilities that elite training produces deliberately, that determine survival outcomes more reliably than caloric reserves or weapon systems. And here's what should make you stop and actually pay attention. None of them appear on any prepper checklist you've ever seen. Not one. Your bug-out guide doesn't mention them. Your favorite survival channel probably hasn't covered them. And ignoring them doesn't just leave you underprepared, it leaves you genuinely dangerous to yourself and to the people depending on you. Let's fix that. The first skill will make your brain push back on instinct, so stay with me. It's the ability to be wrong, fast, cleanly, and without ego. Not adaptable in the vague motivational poster sense, something far more specific, what military psychologists call rapid mental model updating. The ability to recognize that your understanding of a situation is wrong, discard it, and rebuild an accurate one in real time, under pressure, without the delay that ego creates. Here's why this is a life or death capability and not just good advice. When you're in real danger, not drill danger, not theoretical danger, but the kind where your nervous system registers actual stakes, your prefrontal cortex gets throttled. The amygdala takes over and does something evolution designed it to do that catastrophically backfires in complex situations. It locks onto a threat model and defends it. It stops updating. This is why people in emergencies do things that look insane in retrospect. Running the wrong direction, trying the same failed solution on repeat, charging into a burning building looking for someone who already escaped. They're not stupid, they're executing a locked threat model, and they don't have the cognitive infrastructure to override it in the moment. Elite selection programs build that infrastructure through a specific and ruthless method: deliberate disorientation followed by forced reassessment. Candidates are placed in scenarios where the information they received is intentionally wrong. The map doesn't match the terrain. The rendezvous point is empty. The mission briefing is outdated before boots hit the ground. They're assessed not on whether they complete the original plan, they're assessed on the speed and quality of the pivot. The ones who spent time being angry at the bad intel, who keep trying to make the terrain match the map, those are the ones who don't make the cut. You want to see this at the highest possible stakes? May 2nd, 2011, Abbottabad, Pakistan. The first helicopter carrying SEAL Team 6 approaches the compound and loses lift in the warm air. It goes down in the courtyard, hard. In any rigid military operation, that's catastrophic. Mission over. But the team didn't freeze. Within seconds, they updated. New entry points, new timelines, new assignments, executed against a completely different reality than the one they'd rehearsed. The entire raid took 38 minutes. The pivot happened in under 60 seconds. That's not luck. That's a trained mental transition from here's what I expected to here's what's actually true and here's our next move, compressed through thousands of hours of rehearsing the moment of being wrong. Pause right now. Think of one plan you've made that's too rigid. What's your first branch if it fails? Because if you don't have an answer, you've built a plan, not a decision system. The practical application of this is what military planners call branches and sequels. A branch is a pre-decided alternate action triggered by a specific condition change. A sequel is your next operational phase regardless of how the current one resolved. Most preppers build one plan. operators build decision trees, and they rehearse the branch points as seriously as the main route. Your bug-out plan should have at least 3 trigger conditions that switch you to a branch, and everyone in your group should know those conditions before anything goes wrong. The goal isn't a perfect plan. It's a group that can pivot together, fast, without a meeting. The second skill is where this gets genuinely strange, and where the gap between prepper culture and elite military preparation becomes something close to a chasm. It doesn't have a clean common name, but in military and intelligence contexts, it's called situational pattern recognition. What it means in practice, reading an environment not through its individual details, but through the shape of its deviation from normal. Here's a scenario that makes this visceral. An experienced operator moving through a village in a hostile environment isn't cataloging details the way a tourist would. He's reading it the way an ER doctor reads a patient, not by examining every cell, but by building a model of normal and registering everything that breaks it. The chai shop full at noon every day is empty today. The children who play in the street every afternoon aren't there. The elder who always sits outside his door isn't outside. None of these data points alone is alarming. Together, against a trained baseline, they form a signature, a pattern of deviation the trained brain reads as, something has changed here and I need to understand what before I move another step. In 2005 in Mosul, this perceptual skill saved an entire patrol. The intelligence that prevented an ambush wasn't gathered by a sensor or a drone. It was gathered by an operator who noticed that a street always busy at that hour was completely empty, and trusted that observation enough to hold the unit and call for information before proceeding. The threat was confirmed, the unit rerouted, everyone came home. What protected those men wasn't firepower. It was a trained eye that knew what normal looked like and flagged its absence before the analytical mind had time to catch up. This skill is built through 2 practices. First, baseline establishment, deliberately learning what normal looks, sounds, and feels like in the environments you inhabit, so that deviation registers as contrast against a known background. Second, pre-attack indicator recognition, specific behavioral signals that reliably precede violence in human beings across cultures. Target glancing, eyes repeatedly flicking to a person or exit before an action. Grooming behaviors, touching the face, adjusting clothing, spiking in frequency when someone is processing anticipatory anxiety. The 1,000-yard stare that isn't peaceful, but is the hyper-focused internal processing of someone who has made a decision and is waiting to execute it. These signals are probabilistic, not definitive. A trained person reads them in combination with context and baseline to produce a real-time threat assessment that runs almost below conscious thought. For a prepper, this capability is almost entirely absent in training regiments, and the gap is severe in one specific way. The most dangerous thing you'll face in a grid-down scenario isn't a supply shortage, it's people, and your ability to read people and environments accurately will determine outcomes that no stored food can influence. The family at your door, genuinely desperate, or the forward element of a group that watched you carry supplies inside an hour ago? The neighborhood 2 blocks over that nobody has moved through in 2 days. Why? What does that silence mean? This week, walk your neighborhood at dusk. What's missing that should be there? What sounds are absent? What cars haven't moved? You're not paranoid. You're building the baseline your brain needs to flag anomalies automatically, the way a trained perceptual system is supposed to work. Do this consistently for 60 days, and the change in your environmental awareness will be real and measurable. The brain starts running pattern recognition without effort, which is exactly how it's supposed to work, and exactly what won't happen if you've never invested in building the baseline it needs to flag against. The third skill challenges one core value in prepper culture, the fierce independence that's both a huge asset and, unchecked, a real vulnerability. That skill is deliberate interdependence, the ability to build functional, operationally useful trust under stress. Individuals fail at a rate that small, high-trust teams simply do not. This isn't ideology. It's a measured, documented phenomenon that shows up from SEAL deployments to disaster response to POW survival rates. The team doesn't outperform by adding capabilities. It outperforms by an order of magnitude because it distributes cognition across multiple minds, making the whole system dramatically more robust than any single node. After Hurricane Katrina, researchers studying who survived the prolonged infrastructure failure found something that upended the conventional prepper assumption. The prepared individual, isolated on their block, had supplies. The networked family had a constantly updated picture of a changing reality. In a dynamic crisis environment, an accurate picture of what's happening right now is worth more than a month of freeze-dried meals, because without it, you're making decisions blind. A functioning special forces team maintains what military researchers call a shared mental model, a common understanding of the situation, the plan, each member's role, and the decision thresholds that trigger changes in action. This model is continuously updated by every member, fed by whatever each person can see from their position. When the team leader's picture degrades because they're behind cover, processing a threat, or incapacitated, the team doesn't collapse. The picture keeps functioning through the other nodes, no single point of failure. Run that against a standard prepper household. One person has done most of the planning and most of the mental modeling. That one person is the single point of failure. If they go down, and under stress, sleep deprivation, and physical exposure, the probability of that is not zero, not even close. The system fails completely, because the plan lived inside one mind. The military doctrine that solves this is called mission command, and it's worth understanding at the operational level. Mission command says, I will tell you what I intend to achieve and why it matters. You will determine how to achieve it in your area, because you're closer to the conditions than I am. What this produces is a team where every member can make independent decisions that are nonetheless consistent with the group's goal, because they've internalized the intent deeply enough to improvise toward it. They're not following a script, they're pursuing an understanding, and that understanding survives conditions that scripts don't. For your group, this means something specific. Your plan needs to be legible to everyone in it at full operational depth, without you there to explain it. Your kids should know not just where the bag is, but why you're going where you're going, what changes that destination, and what their role is in each scenario. Your partner should be able to execute in your absence, not because they have a manual, but because they share the intent. Building that shared picture requires conversations most groups avoid because they generate anxiety and surface disagreements that feel easier to ignore. But those conversations are worth more to your survival odds than almost any piece of gear you've purchased. Run a tabletop exercise, however informal, where you walk the plan out loud with everyone present and ask what happens when it breaks in the first hour. There's a fourth dimension to interdependence that brings everything in this video to a point, and it's the one most preppers aren't psychologically prepared to face. It's the management of what military doctrine calls the human terrain, the social environment of a crisis, including neighbors, strangers, and potentially hostile actors. Here's the hard truth. The moment your preparation becomes visible to your surrounding community, and it will, because you cannot hide indefinitely in a social environment that has collapsed to the point where everyone is paying close attention to everything, you become a political actor. You have resources, others don't. The way you navigate that reality will determine your medium-term survival more than your food storage or your weapon system. A purely defensive posture has tactical logic and strategic catastrophe baked into the same decision. You can defend a position against individuals. You cannot defend it indefinitely against a motivated community that has decided you're a resource to be acquired. History makes this point repeatedly and without mercy. Special Forces operators in complex environments aren't just warriors. In their most strategically effective context, they're diplomats, building temporary alliances, navigating social hierarchies, creating interactions of mutual benefit with communities that could otherwise become threats. This requires what I'd call operational empathy, not the sentimental kind, but the strategic kind. The ability to accurately model what other people want, fear, and will do, and to use that model to create outcomes that serve everyone's actual interests. You don't have to agree with people, share their values, or fully trust them to engage with them in ways that move toward mutual stability. This is a trainable skill, built right now in the low-stakes social environments available to you, before the stakes are anything other than low. What connects all three skills, rapid mental model updating, environmental pattern recognition, and deliberate interdependence with sophisticated human terrain navigation, is that they are invisible on any gear list and structurally impossible to develop in isolation. That last point is the one that cuts deepest. These capabilities are built through engagement with your environment, with other people, with stress in controlled conditions, and with failure while failure is still recoverable. The individual or isolated household building capacity in private can accumulate supplies. They cannot build any of these three things. The military didn't arrive at this through philosophy. It arrived at it through the brutally empirical process of watching people fail in patterns. The pattern wasn't gear failure. It wasn't caloric deficit. The pattern was cognitive, mental models that locked under stress, environments that couldn't be read, groups that had never built the common picture that lets a unit keep functioning when individual members degrade. Special Forces selection exists to filter for the people who don't fail in those specific ways, and to build the infrastructure in the ones who come close. You don't have Special Forces selection, but you do have something it doesn't. You can choose right now, without external pressure, to begin building these capabilities. The window to do that is open until it isn't. So here's the ladder. This week, pick 2 environments and start building baseline. 30 minutes of deliberate observation at different times of day, consistently enough to know what normal actually looks like. Have the conversation with your people that you've been postponing. Walk the plan out loud with everyone present and ask what happens when it breaks in the first hour. Next 30 days, run one tabletop exercise, however informal, where the main plan fails in the first hour and your group has to navigate from there. Watch where the common picture breaks down. Those gaps are your real preparation deficits. Long-term, keep practicing the pivot.
Every time your mental model of a situation turns out to be wrong, and it will because they always are eventually, notice how long it takes to update. Notice whether ego creates friction in that transition. Compress that gap deliberately, consistently, until it runs almost automatically. Drop your first baseline observation in the comments.